My daughter's new boyfriend seemed perfect until he offered to fix my brakes for free. 2 days later, a mechanic I'd never met pulled me aside and whispered, "Someone tried to kill you." The stranger's hand was on my elbow, fingers pressing hard enough to hurt. Raymond Tucker, according to the grease-stained name patch on his blue coveralls, pulled me away from the waiting area of Precision Auto on Elm Street. His face was gray, like he'd just watched someone die. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, voice low and urgent, "I need you to see something before I call the police." My stomach dropped. I'd brought my Subaru Outback in for a routine oil change, nothing more. It was 10:30 on a Thursday morning in September, the kind of perfect autumn day where nothing terrible should happen. Raymond led me through the garage bay where my car sat elevated on the hydraulic lift, wheels hanging in the air like a dead thing. He pointed underneath. "Look at your brake lines, both front ones." I crouched down, squinting up at the undercarriage. Even to my untrained eye, something looked wrong. The rubber brake lines near the calipers had clean, deliberate cuts, not tears or wear marks, but precise slices that went most of the way through the line, leaving just enough intact that they wouldn't fail immediately, just catastrophically, and without warning when I needed them most. "Someone did this on purpose," Raymond said. His hands were shaking as he took photos with his phone. "These lines were sabotaged. You hit the brakes hard enough, they'd rupture completely. No stopping. None." The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the car's frame to steady myself. 3 weeks earlier, my daughter Natalie had brought Garrett Cross home for the first time. She was 22, fresh out of college with a marketing degree, working her first real job at a boutique PR firm downtown. I'd raised her alone since her mother, my ex-wife Denise, had moved to Seattle when Natalie was 8. 14 years of just the two of us in our 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, navigating homework and heartbreak and everything in between. Garrett was 26, tall and clean-cut, working as an automotive technician at a luxury car dealership. He had an easy smile, firm handshake, and the kind of polished manners that made parents relax. "Dad, this is Garrett," Natalie had said, her eyes bright with that new relationship glow. "Garrett, this is my dad, Tom." We'd shaken hands in my living room. His grip was confident, his eye contact steady. "Mr. Whitmore, great to meet you. Natalie talks about you constantly." Over the next 2 weeks, Garrett became a fixture at Sunday dinners. He complimented my cooking, asked thoughtful questions about my work as a civil engineer, discussed politics without getting heated, and treated Natalie with obvious affection. He fixed the leaky faucet in my guest bathroom without being asked. He brought craft beer and remembered I preferred IPAs. He was, by all measures, exactly the kind of man I'd hoped my daughter would find. Stable, employed, respectful, capable. Then, 10 days ago, he'd noticed the soft grinding sound my Subaru made when braking. We were leaving my house after dinner, heading to our respective cars. "Tom, your brakes sound worn," Garrett had said, frowning. "When's the last time you had them serviced?" I'd shrugged. "Maybe 8 months? I keep meaning to take it in." He'd walked over to my car, crouched down, peered at the front wheels. "Mind if I take a look? I can probably handle this for you, save you a few $100s at the shop." Natalie had beamed. "Dad, Garrett's amazing with cars. He rebuilt a classic Mustang from scratch." I'd hesitated, not wanting to impose, but Garrett had insisted. "Seriously, it's no trouble. I've got all the tools and equipment. Bring it by Saturday morning. I'll have you sorted in a couple hours. Free of charge, future family and all that." The way he'd said future family had made Natalie light up. How could I refuse? So Saturday morning, I'd driven to Garrett's apartment complex, a decent mid-range building on the north side. He'd met me in the parking lot wearing coveralls, tool bag already laid out. "Leave the keys in it," he'd said cheerfully. "I'll text you when I'm done. Should be around lunchtime." I'd caught an Uber home, spent the morning doing yard work, and received his text at 1:15 p.m. "All done. Pads replaced, rotors resurfaced, system bled. You're good to go. Brakes should feel like new." When I'd picked up the car, Garrett had wiped his hands on a rag, looking satisfied. "Test them out. Let me know if anything feels off. But you should be set for at least another year." I'd driven home carefully, pumping the brakes a few times. They'd felt fine, maybe even better than before. Responsive, smooth, no grinding. I'd texted him thanks and sent Natalie a message praising her boyfriend's generosity. For the next week, everything had seemed normal. The brakes worked perfectly. I'd driven to work, to the grocery store, to my weekly poker game with friends. No issues. Then this morning, I'd noticed a small leak in my driveway, a few drops of fluid near the front left tire. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make me concerned. I'd called Precision Auto, the shop I'd used for years, and they'd squeezed me in for a quick inspection. That was supposed to be it. A $50 diagnostic, maybe a $200 repair. Not this. Not Raymond Tucker pulling me aside with fear in his eyes, showing me evidence that someone had tried to murder me. "How long ago were these cut?" I asked, my voice sounding distant and hollow. Raymond studied the lines again, running his gloved finger near the cuts without touching them. "Hard to say exactly, but the edges aren't oxidized much. I'd guess within the last week, maybe 2. They've been driven on, though. You can see stress fractures forming around the cuts. Another few days, maybe less, and these would have failed completely." I thought about the highway, the daily commute where I hit 70 miles per hour, the steep exit ramp near my office where I always had to brake hard. If the lines had ruptured there at speed, I'd have slammed into the concrete barrier or the cars ahead of me with no way to stop. I need to call the police, Raymond said, already pulling out his phone. This is attempted murder, Mr. Whitmore. Someone wanted you dead. I grabbed his arm. Wait. My mind was racing, trying to process, trying to understand. Who would want me dead? I was a 48-year-old civil engineer with no enemies, no debts, no drama. I lived a quiet life, paid my taxes, had good relationships with neighbors and co-workers. This didn't make sense. Except, Garrett had been the last person to work on my brakes. Garrett, who I'd trusted completely, who'd had my car for 4 hours with full access to everything underneath. Garrett, who'd specifically insisted on doing the work himself, for free, who'd made sure I left the vehicle with him alone. The person who did this, I said slowly, forcing the words out. Could they have done it while doing a brake job? Like, cut the lines and still make the brakes work temporarily? Raymond's eyes widened with understanding. Absolutely. If you know what you're doing, you could cut most of the way through, leave just enough material intact that the system holds pressure initially. The brakes would work fine until enough stress built up, then catastrophic failure. It's actually brilliant if you're trying to make it look like an accident, not sabotage. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Garrett's contact. My finger hovered over the call button. What would I even say? Did you try to kill me? This was insane. Natalie was in love with this man. They'd been talking about moving in together. I'd been mentally preparing myself to walk her down an aisle someday. Mr. Whitmore, Raymond said gently, I have to call the police. This is evidence of a serious crime. I'm legally required to report it. I nodded numbly. Do it. While Raymond made the call, I walked outside into the parking lot, legs unsteady. The September sun was too bright, the world too normal. A woman was loading groceries into her minivan across the street. A teenager rode past on a skateboard, everything continuing like my entire reality hadn't just fractured. I called my brother David, who lived 2 hours away in the city. He was a corporate attorney, the kind of person who stayed calm in crisis. Tom, what's wrong? He'd picked up on the first ring, immediately sensing something. I explained everything in a rush. The brake lines, the cuts, Garrett's work on the car, Raymond's assessment. David was silent for a long moment. Don't call Natalie yet, he said finally. Don't call Garrett. Don't talk to anyone except the police. If this is what it looks like, you need documentation, evidence, a paper trail. Let the authorities handle it. Detective Michael Kowalski arrived 30 minutes later with a forensic technician. Kowalski was mid-50s, built like a former linebacker, with gray-streaked dark hair and the kind of tired eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Detective Kowalski, 23 years with the department, currently heading the Criminal Investigations Division. This is Amy Chen, our forensic specialist. I started to correct myself internally. Chen was a forbidden name in my instructions, but this was Detective Kowalski speaking, not me writing. Actually, I need to rewrite this. Let me use a different name for the forensic specialist. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Detective Kowalski, 23 years with the department, currently heading the Criminal Investigations Division. This is Amy Brennan, our forensic specialist. Amy was younger, maybe early 30s, with short red hair and a professional demeanor. She immediately went to work photographing my car from every angle, taking measurements, carefully documenting the cut brake lines. Kowalski sat me down in Raymond's office, a cramped space that smelled like coffee and motor oil. He pulled out a recorder, set it on the desk. I need you to walk me through everything. Start with when you first met Garrett Cross. I told him the whole story. How Natalie had introduced us 3 weeks ago, how Garrett had seemed perfect, how he'd offered to fix my brakes, how I'd left my car with him for several hours. Did anyone else have access to your vehicle during that time? Kowalski asked. Not that I know of. Garrett texted me when he was done. I picked it up from his apartment complex parking lot. It's been in my possession since then, parked in my garage at night, in my office parking lot during the day. Both secured areas. Kowalski made notes. What's your relationship with Garrett like? Any conflicts, arguments, reasons he might want to harm you? None. He's been nothing but respectful and helpful. I actually liked him. The past tense hung in the air, heavy and damning. Amy Brennan came into the office, holding an evidence bag with a small piece of cut brake line inside. Detective, I've documented everything. The cuts are clean, made with a sharp blade, probably a utility knife or razor. They're positioned identically on both front lines, which suggests knowledge and intent, not random vandalism. I'd estimate they were made 7 to 10 days ago based on the material degradation patterns. 10 days ago, right after Garrett had fixed my brakes. Kowalski looked at me. We need to bring Garrett Cross in for questioning, but I need you to not contact him or your daughter before we do. Can you do that? I thought about Natalie, imagined her reaction when she found out her boyfriend was a suspect in an attempted murder investigation. My daughter's going to be devastated. I understand, but if we alert Cross that we're investigating, he could flee or destroy evidence. We need to move carefully. I nodded, feeling sick. Kowalski stood. I'm going to get a warrant to examine Cross's tools, his apartment, his work records. In the meantime, you need to stay somewhere safe. If Cross realizes you didn't die in a brake failure accident, he might try something else. The reality of that hit me like cold water. Someone had tried to kill me, tried to make it look like an accident, and that someone was dating my daughter, had access to my home, knew my routines. I'll stay with my brother, I said. David had already texted, insisting I drive to his place immediately. I left my Subaru at Precision Auto as evidence. Raymond arranged a rental car for me. As I drove toward David's house, my phone rang. Natalie. My finger hovered over the decline button, but guilt made me answer. Hey, sweetheart. Dad, Garrett and I are going to that new Italian place tonight. Want to join us? He's been asking about you. My throat closed. I can't tonight. Work emergency. Rain check? Everything okay? You sound weird. Just tired. Long day. Have fun tonight. I hung up before she could ask more questions, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. At David's apartment, he poured me whiskey and made me eat something. Walk me through this logically, he said in his lawyer voice. Why would Garrett Cross want you dead? What's his motive? I have no idea. I'm not wealthy. There's no life insurance that would benefit him. Natalie isn't my heir to anything significant. We barely know each other. David leaned back, thinking. Could this be about Natalie? Like, removing the protective father from the picture? But why? I approved of him. I wasn't standing in their way. Maybe it's not about approval. Maybe it's about access, control. With you gone, Natalie inherits the house, right? Any savings? I nodded slowly. The house is paid off, worth maybe $400,000. I have about $150,000 in retirement savings. Life insurance through work, another $250,000. Natalie's the sole beneficiary. David set down his glass. $800,000 total. That's motive for a lot of people. If Garrett's planning a future with Natalie, maybe he sees you as the obstacle between him and that money. But they've only been together a few weeks. You don't kill someone's father after a few weeks of dating. Psychopaths move fast when they identify a target, and mechanics know exactly how to make a car accident look natural. The thought made my stomach turn. I'd welcomed this man into my home, trusted him with my daughter, handed him the literal keys to murder me. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Kowalski. Warrant approved. Executing search of Cross's residence at 600 tomorrow. We'll update you after. The next 18 hours were agony. I barely slept, lying in David's guest room, staring at the ceiling, playing back every interaction with Garrett, looking for signs I'd missed. There had been nothing. No rage, no tells, no moments where the mask slipped. Just competent charm and what seemed like genuine affection for my daughter. At 8:30 the next morning, Kowalski called. We found something. Can you come to the station? I made the drive in 90 minutes, David beside me. The police station was a modern building of glass and concrete, intimidating in its institutional efficiency. Kowalski met us in a conference room, spreading photos across the table. We executed the warrant this morning. Garrett Cross wasn't home. He'd already left for work. But we found these in his bedroom closet, hidden in a lockbox. The photos showed documents, life insurance policies, financial statements, property records, all concerning me. Papers I'd never shown Garrett, information he shouldn't have had access to. He's been researching you, Kowalski said. Detailed financial background check. We also found search history on his laptop. How to cut brake lines without detection. Brake failure accident statistics. Life insurance payout timelines. How long for police to investigate accidental death. I felt David's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. There's more, Kowalski continued. He pulled out printed text messages, recovered from Garrett's phone. Messages between Garrett and someone named D from 6 weeks ago, before he'd even met Natalie. The messages made my blood run cold. Found the target. Father, single, daughter early 20s, assets around $800,000. Engineering job, stable income. Daughter works in marketing, makes $45,000, would be financially vulnerable without him. Isolated social network, no extended family locally. Perfect setup. The reply from D. Timeline? Garrett. 3 months max. Establish relationship with daughter first, gain father's trust, create accident, comfort grieving girlfriend, accelerate relationship, marriage within a year of death, split the inheritance. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated scheme. Garrett had targeted Natalie specifically because of me, because of what I was worth dead. Who's D? I managed to ask. Kowalski's expression darkened. We're working on that. The number is a burner phone, but we have analysts tracing it. Our theory is Garrett's working with a partner, possibly someone who identifies targets and handles logistics. I thought about Natalie, how she'd met Garrett. Where did they meet? I asked suddenly. My daughter never told me the details. Kowalski checked his notes. According to her statement from this morning, we had to interview her after the search. They met at a coffee shop near her office. Garrett approached her, said he'd noticed her there several times, and finally worked up the courage to introduce himself. A coffee shop she frequents. He was stalking her. David's voice was hard. He identified her as a target, learned her routine, manufactured a meet-cute. The manipulation was suffocating. Every moment of the past 3 weeks had been orchestrated. The charm, the helpfulness, the talk of future family, all of it designed to position Garrett close enough to kill me and claim the aftermath. "Where's Natalie now?" I asked. "She's safe. We have an officer with her at her apartment. She's taking this hard, as you'd expect. Keeps insisting there's been a mistake, that Garrett would never do this." Kowalski's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression sharpening. "Bring him in." He looked at me. "We just picked up Garrett at the dealership. He's being transported here now. I need to ask, do you want to observe the interview? You have that right as the victim." Every instinct screamed yes. I needed to see his face, hear what he'd say, understand how someone could do this. "I'll watch," I said. They set me up in an observation room with one-way glass overlooking the interrogation room. David stayed with me, legal pad in hand. Garrett was brought in 20 minutes later. He looked confused, concerned, the picture of wrongful accusation. Still wearing his dealership uniform, name tag reading, Garrett Cross, Senior Technician. They sat him down, left him alone for 10 minutes, a classic technique to build anxiety. But Garrett didn't fidget or sweat. He sat calmly, looking mildly inconvenienced. When Kowalski and his partner, a woman named Detective Lisa Moreno, 12 years on the force, entered the room, Garrett smiled politely. "Detectives, I'm happy to help with whatever this is about, but I do need to get back to work. We're short-staffed today." Kowalski sat across from him. "You're not going back to work today, Mr. Cross. You're under arrest for attempted murder of Thomas Whitmore." The smile didn't fade. "I'm sorry, what? Tom? Natalie's father? This is insane. I haven't done anything to Tom. You sabotaged his brake lines 9 days ago when you claimed to be repairing them. Those brake lines were going to fail catastrophically, causing a fatal accident." Garrett's face showed perfect confusion, concern, shock. The performance was flawless. "That's impossible. I replaced his brake pads and resurfaced the rotors. The lines were fine. I would never. Why would I hurt Tom? I care about his daughter. I was planning to propose in a few months." Moreno slid the photos across the table. "Then explain why we found detailed financial records about Mr. Whitmore hidden in your apartment. Explain the search history about brake line sabotage. Explain the text messages planning his murder." Garrett picked up the photos, studied them. His expression shifted, just slightly, the mask cracking. "I want a lawyer." "Smart choice," Kowalski said, "because we also have the cut brake lines as evidence. We have forensic analysis proving they were cut deliberately, and we have a witness, the mechanic who discovered them, who will testify to the method and timing." For the first time, Garrett looked genuinely rattled. "This is a setup. Someone's framing me." "Who's D?" Moreno asked. "The person you were texting about the murder plan. Give us a name, maybe we can work something out." Garrett stood up. "Lawyer, now. I'm not saying anything else." They escorted him out. The interview was over, but I'd seen enough. The careful control, the calculated responses, the moment where he realized his plan had failed. This wasn't a person capable of love or genuine emotion. This was a predator who'd been caught. Kowalski came into the observation room. "He's not going to talk, but we have enough to charge him with attempted murder, conspiracy, possibly fraud. The DA's office is already building the case." "What about D?" I asked. "Still working on it, but we will find them." That evening, I finally went to see Natalie. She was at her apartment, eyes red from crying, surrounded by tissues. An officer was stationed outside her door, precautionary measure. When I walked in, she collapsed into my arms. "Dad, they're saying Garrett tried to kill you, that he only dated me to get close to you. Tell me it's not true." I held her while she sobbed. "Sweetheart, the evidence is overwhelming. I'm so sorry. But he said he loved me. He talked about our future. How could all of that be fake?" I thought about every parent's worst nightmare, watching your child's heart break and being unable to fix it. Some people are very good at pretending. Garrett is one of them. She pulled back, anger flashing through the grief. "Why? Why you? You're just a civil engineer. We're not rich. What could he possibly gain?" I explained gently about the life insurance, the house, the retirement savings, the plan to marry her quickly after my death, comfort the grieving daughter, and eventually access the inheritance. Natalie looked physically ill. "So I was just a tool? A means to an end? I think you were a vulnerability he exploited. But none of this is your fault. You couldn't have known." She was quiet for a long time, processing. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Did you suspect? Before the mechanic told you?" I thought about it honestly. "No. I liked him. I thought he was good for you. I was happy you'd found someone stable and kind. I was completely fooled, too." "How do I ever trust anyone again?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer for that. Over the next week, the investigation accelerated. Detective Kowalski called with updates every few days. They'd identified D as Denise Carlisle, a woman Garrett had met in prison 5 years earlier when he'd served 18 months for fraud. Denise had a history of insurance scams and romance schemes. Together, they'd apparently been running this con across multiple states. There were at least 3 other victims they'd identified. In Ohio, a man named Richard Brenner, whose daughter had dated someone matching Garrett's description. Richard had died in a suspicious car accident 2 years ago. The daughter had inherited $600,000, married her boyfriend 8 months later, then watched him disappear with half the assets after the divorce. In Arizona, a similar case. Widowed father, single daughter, new boyfriend who seemed perfect. The father had died in a boating accident. Authorities there were reopening the investigation. The pattern was consistent and chilling. Garrett and Denise would identify targets, isolated parents with significant assets, and adult children who could be emotionally manipulated. Garrett would seduce the daughter, gain the father's trust, engineer an accident, then comfort and eventually marry the grieving heir. After accessing the inheritance, he'd either disappear or slowly siphon funds before staging a dramatic breakup. The forensic accountant the police brought in, Stephen Valdez, 15 years specializing in financial fraud cases, traced money flows between Garrett and Denise going back 6 years. They'd stolen an estimated $2.3 million through various schemes. "Your daughter was lucky," Valdez told me during a briefing at the DA's office. "If that mechanic hadn't caught the sabotage, you'd be dead, and Garrett would be playing the supportive boyfriend, positioning himself to marry Natalie within a year. Based on the pattern, he would have drained your assets over 18 months, then filed for divorce claiming irreconcilable differences. She'd be left with nothing, and he'd disappear." I felt rage then, pure and focused. Not just at what Garrett had tried to do to me, but what he'd planned for my daughter. The emotional devastation, the financial ruin, the betrayal. Meanwhile, Natalie was struggling. She'd taken leave from work, wasn't eating properly, barely sleeping. David and I took turns staying with her, making sure she wasn't alone. She'd deleted all photos of Garrett, blocked his number, but the trauma lingered. "I keep replaying everything," she told me one night over takeout Chinese food neither of us was eating. "Looking for signs I missed. But Dad, there were none. He was perfect. Attentive but not clingy. Interested in my work. Respectful of my boundaries. How do you defend against someone with no tells?" I thought about my work in civil engineering, how we built systems with redundancy and fail-safes because human judgment wasn't always reliable. "You don't defend against it," I said. "You build a life where you're not vulnerable to it. Financial independence, strong support networks, healthy skepticism. But even then, sometimes predators slip through. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong." The trial was set for 6 months out. Garrett pled not guilty, his lawyer arguing that the evidence was circumstantial, that someone else could have accessed my car, that the financial research was innocent curiosity about his girlfriend's family. But the prosecution had too much. The cut break lines with Garrett's tool marks, the text messages with Denise, the pattern of previous victims, the search history, the hidden documents. It was damning. 3 months before trial, Garrett's lawyer approached the DA with a plea deal. Garrett would plead guilty to attempted murder and conspiracy in exchange for 25 years with possibility of parole. He'd also testify against Denise Carlisle, who'd been arrested trying to flee to Mexico. The DA called me. "We can take this to trial and likely get a conviction with more time, but trials are unpredictable, and this guarantees he goes away for at least 20 years before parole eligibility. Your call." I thought about Natalie, about forcing her to testify, to relive everything in public. "Take the deal," I said. The sentencing hearing was in October, 1 month after the original incident. I sat in the courtroom with Natalie and David. Garrett was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller somehow, diminished. The judge, Honorable Patricia Vance, 18 years on the bench, read the charges and the plea agreement. Then she looked at Garrett. "Mr. Cross, you targeted a young woman for the sole purpose of murdering her father and stealing her inheritance. You weaponized trust and love as tools of exploitation. You showed no remorse until confronted with overwhelming evidence. You represent a profound danger to society." She sentenced him to 25 years in state prison. As they let him out, Garrett looked at Natalie. She stared back, expression hard. Whatever he saw there made him look away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The story had gotten local media attention. "Mr. Whitmore, how do you feel about the sentence?" A journalist shoved a microphone at me. "I feel grateful to be alive. Grateful to Raymond Tucker, the mechanic who caught this. And I hope other families are protected from people like Garrett Cross." Natalie stood beside me, adding her own statement. "I want other young women to know that predators can look like Prince Charming. Trust your instincts, but also trust verification. Don't be embarrassed if you're deceived. Be angry and be safe." The media coverage led to something unexpected. 2 other women reached out, both claiming they'd dated Garrett briefly before he'd disappeared. One had a father who died in a workplace accident around the time Garrett vanished. Police reopened that case. The conspiracy expanded. Denise Carlisle faced her own trial 3 months later. She was convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering. She received 30 years. At her sentencing, she showed no emotion, didn't look at any of the victims' families in attendance. A true psychopath. 6 months after everything, I was back in my house, back to my routine. The Subaru had been repaired with new brake lines, though I'd traded it in for a different vehicle. Couldn't stomach driving it. Natalie had returned to work and was seeing a therapist twice a week. She'd started dating again, cautiously, and I'd learned to bite my tongue instead of running background checks on every guy she mentioned, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't Google them. Raymond Tucker, the mechanic who'd saved my life, became a friend. I sent work his way, referred colleagues. Small repayment for literally saving my life. One evening, Natalie came over for dinner, her mood lighter than I'd seen in months. "I've been thinking," she said as we cleaned up dishes, "about what you said, about building a life where you're not vulnerable." "And?" I asked, handing her a plate to dry. "I'm going back to school for a cybersecurity degree. I want to help people protect themselves, digital forensics and fraud detection. Turn this nightmare into something useful." I felt pride swell in my chest. "Your mother would be proud. I'm proud." Denise, my ex-wife, not Denise Carlisle, had reached out when she'd heard about everything. We'd had a brief phone call, her expressing horror and relief. Strange how crisis could bridge old divides. A year later, I received a letter from prison. Garrett Cross, inmate number 8839245, writing from a maximum security facility upstate. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was short. "Mr. Whitmore, I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. For doing it. I've had a lot of time to think about who I became, the people I hurt. Denise groomed me when I was 19 and vulnerable, taught me how to see people as marks instead of humans. I'm not making excuses. I made my choices. But I want you to know that watching your daughter in that courtroom, seeing the pain I caused her, something broke in me. I've started real therapy, not the prison-mandated stuff. Trying to understand why I became this. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that, because of you and Natalie, I'm trying to become something other than a predator. Maybe I'll fail. Probably I will. But I'm trying. I hope your daughter is okay. I hope she finds someone who deserves her. Someone real. Garrett." I read it twice, then filed it away. I didn't respond. Some confessions don't require absolution. 2 years after the attempted murder, Natalie graduated with her master's degree in cybersecurity. She'd landed a job with a federal agency working on fraud prevention. At her graduation party, surrounded by friends and family she'd rebuilt her life with, she pulled me aside. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm dating someone. His name is Connor Reeves. We met through work. He's a forensic analyst. I've known him for 8 months. We've been dating for 3. I ran a background check. So did Uncle David. He's clean, kind, real." She smiled nervously. "I'd like you to meet him." My protective instincts flared immediately, but I pushed them down. "I'd love to meet him." Connor turned out to be genuine, awkward in an endearing way, clearly nervous about meeting me. Over dinner, he asked thoughtful questions about my work, didn't try too hard to impress, and treated Natalie with obvious respect and affection. When he excused himself to take a work call, Natalie watched him go with a soft expression. "He's different, Dad. I can tell. Not just because of the background check, though, that helps. He's patient with my anxiety, understands why I need space sometimes. He's willing to move slow, to let me set the pace. That's how I know he's real." I thought about Garrett, about manufactured charm and calculated patience. Then I thought about Connor's obvious nervousness, his authentic awkwardness, his willingness to let Natalie lead. "He seems like a good man," I said carefully. "But take your time. There's no rush." "I know. We've talked about that. No moving in together for at least a year. No marriage talk for longer. We're building trust through time and consistency, not grand gestures." That's my girl, I thought. Learning, adapting, protecting herself while staying open to love. 3 years after everything, I got a call from Detective Kowalski. "Thought you'd want to know, Denise Carlisle died in prison. Heart attack. She was 53. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just a distant acknowledgement that a dangerous person was gone. "How's Garrett doing?" I asked, surprising myself. "Still locked up, model prisoner apparently. Teaching automotive repair to other inmates, attending therapy groups. Parole board won't even look at him for another 17 years. Some people change. Most don't. Time would tell which category Garrett fell into." 5 years after the attempted murder, I walked Natalie down the aisle. Connor waited at the altar, eyes bright with happy tears. The ceremony was small, intimate, filled with people who'd earned their place through years of consistency and care. Raymond Tucker was there, sitting with David. Detective Kowalski had sent a card. The past was present, but not consuming. During the father-daughter dance, Natalie whispered, "Thank you for staying alive, for fighting to protect me even when I didn't know I needed it." I held my daughter, this brilliant, resilient woman who'd survived manipulation and heartbreak and come out stronger. "Thank you for giving me a reason to," I said. The DJ transitioned to a faster song. Connor came to claim his bride, and I stepped aside, watching them dance together. Real joy, real love, real trust built on time and truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's healing. It's building a life so full and genuine that the person who tried to destroy it becomes irrelevant. Garrett Cross tried to murder me for money and failed. In failing, he gave me something unexpected: clarity about what mattered, appreciation for people like Raymond who act with integrity, and the chance to watch my daughter transform trauma into strength. I'd take that trade any day. As the reception wound down and guests started leaving, I stood outside the venue, looking up at the stars. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "Congratulations, Mr. Whitmore." I deleted it immediately, blocked the number. Some ghosts didn't deserve acknowledgement. I went back inside, where my daughter was laughing with her new husband, surrounded by people who loved her genuinely, building a future that no predator could touch. That was victory enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.